that, the hour of temptation. There will be an hour of temptation, of course, which has come upon the world. We saw it. We saw it happen. It was a temptation of the Han Mother, the temptation that came over the whole world. From the micro to the macro, you saw the world implode after that. The world literally went to hell in a handbasket in the last 3-4 years. Nobody, if you said in Korea 3 years ago, if you told them, well, Korea is going to have judgment, they all laughed at you because it was in the height of prosperity. There was no signs of upcoming problems. And of course, the worldwide foundation that True Father created was positioned right there to have dominant influence in the Eastern circles. And of course, began Cheon Il Guk sovereignty there. If the Korean military, of course, and the Defense Department, who was working very closely with us, listened and took our suggestions, and this is going back 10 years now with Kook Jin Nim, of the bringing the firearms closer to the people, in the sense that everybody has to, all males have to go to the Korean military, they have to serve, but when they come home, they should be able to bring their weapons back home. And then through that, you'll be able to, they will naturally train their wife, they will naturally train their children, and just in case they get attacked by some demonic forces, North Korea, communist governments, China, massive military buildup. We were warning about that 10 years ago to the Korean generals, right? And you saw some of the generals that came to our events. You're talking about 60 plus stars, okay? 5-star generals, 50 plus. So you're talking about a lot of power. And of course, they were completely unprepared. They were completely undirected. So they were receiving godly direction in the way that South Korea must prepare. Okay. And of course, if they did that, then you would have a situation like Switzerland, or you have a situation like Israel, where people, the people who serve would come back and they would be able to train their families, their children, and then they would realize that the rod of iron is not only for federalized military power. In fact, it's right there to defend you too when you need it at your home, you see. So maybe the husband's going away on a business trip or something. Or, okay, honey, you already trained how to use it. If somebody tries to come here and do some bad things, you know how to defend yourself, right? There's a natural culture of sheepdog mentality, able type culture will start re-emerging. And then the Korean people could start seeing themselves less as slaves of the state and more as sovereign peoples. And of course, they would of course be able to transform that entire nation, peninsula, into a military force. If the North attacked, China attacked, you name it, whatever, any predators attack, they would immediately, in an instant, transform into a dangerous military force. You're talking about 20, maybe let's say conservative, 10 million plus in 1 hour. Now that's a force to be reckoned with, right? Hitler didn't touch Switzerland because within 1 hour, you'd have 1 million plus armed, ready guys, ready to go. Because they have that system. Hitler didn't touch it because he said, oh, goodness, if I go, I'm going to lose 1 million men in the first probably a couple hours. That's not worth it. I'm not going to touch that. So he touched everything else. He got all of Europe, but he didn't touch Switzerland. That's interesting. Right? You got Israel, where you have all those hostile nations around, the radical Islamic nations all around. They don't touch Israel. They shoot occasionally at it, but they cannot conquer it. Because Israel as well has a civilian population, even the girls. Girls also must do mandatory training, which is great. That's fantastic. That's Cheon Il Guk culture. The girls unlock their epigenetics, they become real women, you know, and they become stronger. And of course, they walk around with their miniskirts and the AR-15s, but, you know, in Israel, they walk around in their bikinis on the beach with the AR-15s. And they're not getting raped. Okay, but that's another thing. But that whole army, that whole civilian population, boom, 6 million military force right away to confront any predators that are thinking to come in. All right? So those are not only historical cases, those are also cases which are also present in the first Israel, in, of course, America, and of course, in Asia, it would be so critical to get the peninsula of South Korea. They had the best chance of doing it. Because we were the only ones in the elite class, the only ones talking about this stuff, the only ones. Nobody else. They're all globalists. Well, you know, let's say 80% of them. There are more able-type people, but they need to be directed and led. Then they'll start, because this kind of thinking is so incredibly out of their brainwashing. Right? They've all been brainwashed to be slaves of the state, to have absolutely no power, and to be able to have absolutely no sovereignty whatsoever. Okay? So you have to understand the level of brainwashing conditioning in the general population, even the elite class. Of course, they're the perpetrators of it. They collude with George Soros and international bankers to bring in that kind of wacky system. Essentially a communist system masked in the guise of some pockets of free market, but really a slave state. Okay? Nobody, even the military, were thinking like that. Okay? Only the Moon Boys, only Reverend Moon, only True Father was thinking that. He was sending his boys to work with the Defense Department. You name it, we had them at our events, etc. We had generals, etc. You name it. Why? Because True Father was the first one who started the gun business in Korea. That was the first business. And then, of course, eventually went on to develop the Vulcan cannon. You saw that. You see the King's Report? You guys see that big round on top there? On the glass desk there that I almost crack every day slamming on it? I do have to apologize for that, you know, but hey, the Spirit of God comes down. Just get angry sometimes. But that chief gave me that, and that's a round in the Vulcan cannon. And it's like an explosive round, so he said that when it hits a tree, boom, the whole thing evaporates. Okay, and it's like, it doesn't, they used to call it, Chief was saying, they used to call it, the Vulcan cannon, the Banshee, because it doesn't sound like, pop, 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 it doesn't sound like that. It sounds like, that's how it literally sounds, right? It's like, but it's like, fasten that, you can't even hear the sound. It literally sounds like, that's the Banshee. So when you hear that sound, it's like, holy shit, you better run, boom, boom, boom. It's like, you know, the devil's all running, okay? So only True Father was the one who was developing the Vulcan cannon to help strengthen the South Korean military. Why? Because he fled the totalitarian North, almost killed by the totalitarian North, saw people being hung, murdered, eyes stabbed out, shot in the head, all that from when he was very young. He knows the nature of totalitarian satanic political Satanism. Okay? Seen it, been there, lived it, breathed it, and was oppressed under it. Which is the reason why he fought all his life against communism, worldwide centralized communism, UN, centralized worldwide government communism, you name it. Okay? Even creating the Washington Post, Times, Washington Times. Not the Washington Compost, I'm sorry. The Washington Times. To fight for conservative issues, okay? If Asia, if South Korea would have transformed in such a way, then of course we were already making coalition with Japan. Kook Jin Nim was already meeting Abe before he was the prime minister, already met Mrs. Park before she was the president of Korea. You're talking about the highest levels of geopolitics in Asia.